Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the podcast. I am Stugar,
And I'm Centaur.
and this episode is sponsored by the Civil Defense Initiative. The Civil Defense Initiative is Bretonia's premier, budget law enforcement agency. You can rest easy knowing that we will do everything in our power to keep you safe, providing our ships pass maintenance. We have the budget for fuel, and it doesn't look too hazardous. Speaking of CDI, Zentor, who do we have in the studio today?
Lined up today, we have longtime Discovery vet and one of the current leads, dev leads, and that's Jammy, who's big into Bretonia at the moment. So say hi to everyone, Jammy.
Hello there.
Hello, Jamie. So, as is custom with all of our guests on the show, we want to try to figure out who you are and what brought you to Freelancer. So, this is your platform. Tell us your freelancer story, your first flights out into serious space, and what brought you to Discovery.
Well, I would say who I am is someone who has been at Discovery for far, far too long. But
Welcome
yeah,
to the club.
freelancer, I've been playing since probably 2005, I would say. I remember having a stroll through one of the old game stores on the high street here in the UK, and freelancer was in the red box, the explosive publisher one, and it was in the 4 for £20 section. And I
Yeah,
just
for all
grabbed
you
one of them.
youngsters out there, games used to come in these cardboard boxes, and you'd take them home, and you'd run these round things called compact discs. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, it didn't even have Steam then. It didn't exist.
Nope.
Yeah, so I obviously got freelancer then, played through the campaign, had an absolute nightmare of a time. I thought it was the most difficult game I'd ever played. And I found out in hindsight, about a year or so later, that it was because I had skipped through the tutorial window at the very beginning of the game and not read it properly, and didn't realise that thrusters existed. So I'd gone through the entire campaign at impulse speed
Oh,
and cruise speed,
wow.
Oh my
which
gosh.
was
Sounds
absolutely
brutal.
hellish. Yeah.
I imagine that last mission where you have to go into the trenches of the Dyson sphere. I bet that was tricky.
Mm. Yeah, so I actually initially gave up on freelancer in the free roam after the campaign, where I've been out exploring, and I knew that you could get these mythical, very heavy fighters somewhere, and I was out exploring in the Omegas, and there was just this Corsair patrol that I couldn't get past in Omega 41, and I was just being dogpiled repeatedly near one of the jump holes, and you couldn't cruise away because they'd disrupt you. Couldn't fight back because there were too many of them. They'd just tear me to pieces. And I was like, this is impossible. I can't get any further. I'm just going to give up. And there was a bit of a gap when I came back after I dug the disc out, like a year or so later, and I tried again. And I thought, I'll try the campaign again. And the little tutorial box popped up, and I actually read it this time. Like, oh, this makes a difference. This is a completely different experience.
It's night and day.
Yeah, night and day. Yeah. But it was after that I started looking around at the modding community as well, because playing through the campaign, you get to the bit at the very end where they're like, "Okay, Mr. Trent, you will be our man in Liberty. We'll be in contact soon." Like, okay, Aurelian, where is the net value target? Where is the next mission? When is it coming? Like, do I need to get to 1,000,000 credits and then I get the next mission? But no, it's just done. So
Yeah.
at that point, I was thinking, I want to find more freelancer. What comes next? And it probably would have been a very close call thing whether I went into Crossfire or Discovery, because both of them were kind of like advertising themselves as the next step in freelance. Like, this is what happens after the campaign ends. And just on a whim, by chance, I ended up going into Discovery and having this massive populated server where around that time, I think the cap was 112 people, but it was regularly maxing out the cap. And having all of those people flying around, and this was the first actual multiplayer experience I'd had online ever.
Nice.
Kind of like a real kind of formative memory in terms of gaming and stuff.
Yeah,
And from
it
there,
was very
just the role
similar
play
to me.
element as well. Yeah.
So did you go
But
straight into modding when you did online, or did you try any vanilla servers first?
no, it was basically just straight to modding because I tried a few different mods, and most of them were kind of like just very wacky shit packs with like lots and lots of stuff in them that just felt a little bit disjointed, and like, it was full of Star Trek stuff, it's full of Star Wars stuff, and
Oh,
it just
yeah.
didn't really feel like Freelancer to me, so I just kind of bounced off it. And I ended up in Discovery, which is very ironic because at the time that was also full of Star Wars ships and like Battlestar Galactica ships and all that kind of stuff.
A
But
lot
there
of those
was,
early servers were full of Star Wars and
mm,
Star Trek ships.
yeah, I think there must have been like a community ship pack that someone had open sourced and said like mods are allowed to use this because the same kind of ships were showing up in all these different packs.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, something about Discovery just held my interest, and that was the one that I stuck with. And I think it was probably the role play aspect as well, because like fairly early on when I was just kind of like poodling around the the server and trying to figure out what was going on. Very quickly, I got pulled into the kind of the Corsair orbit, as many new players do, and I ended up joining the Benitez family, which were like one of the three big Corsair groups at the time. So you had like the Brotherhood, the Benitez, and at the time it was the Omega Pirates Guild, which is kind of like the precursor to the original Black Sails.
Hmm.
But yeah, like just the whole player faction element and how the role play made the game environment feel more alive. That was just something that really got its hooks into me, and like on and off. I've been around Discovery more or less ever since. Like, admittedly, some big gaps here and there, but it's just something that I've always ended up coming back to.
So what year was this when you first started getting in with Discovery?
I would say that would have been 2007, I reckon.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, I understood that you had been around nearly since the beginning, from what I had looked up. That's cool.
yeah, that was because I came from vanilla and yeah, I'm a little sad for you because yeah, the vanilla experience is fun. It does get old after a while, of course, but it is fun and it's different. With vanilla online, pretty much everyone that did PvP it had the same setup. You had Zona del Cids, which were the straight up shield killers, and then you had
Nomad Blasters.
yeah, well, Nomad blasters too, if your
Yeah,
guns or the cannonball missiles. I
cannonballs
always
and
had
Nova Torp. That's right.
yep. And then Locke was telling us last episode, and I had completely forgotten about it. But if you flew the Eagle, you'd have a friend shoot off the tail of the Eagle,
Mm.
and it made you turn faster. It's a
Yeah, well,
little
there's actually a joke reference to that in the mod currently. You've got the Damaged Eagle variant, which is sold on Bornholm, which
oh,
is
really?
literally just an eagle that's missing its tail fins.
Oh, that's funny. That's awesome. I think I'm gonna go
Yeah,
check it out.
I don't think it's a very good deal personally because it does turn slightly quicker, but you also lose hull and bats and bots. So it is a bit of a gimmick. It's a funny joke, but I don't think I would actually want to fly
Really gonna get one just to fly missions, and I'll call it Cannonball.
it. Yeah,
So
but yeah, like early Discovery had a lot of the same quirks as vanilla combat as well, and the cannonball thing especially. And the reason for that is because there was a bug in vanilla that was carried across into Discovery as well, which is explosive damage was multiplied across all of the components in a ship if it covered them. So the
Ah,
right.
reason that your cannonball was so effective is because, like, if you were fighting a Titan, for example, you have the core body where the cockpit's mounted, you have the upper fin, you have the two wings, and if the cannonball hit each of those components, you were possibly doing 4 times, 5 times the actual listed damage value for what the cannonball said it should do. And Discovery took an approach to fixing that, which was rather than actually apply proper damage for like explosion resistances to the components to stop it from multiplying, we just fused all the ships into a single block, which I feel kind of destroyed a little bit of the soul of the game because it was always fun watching the wings fly off ships and stuff. I mean, I can understand the reasons why for it as well because when you've got like mod added ships as well. Like especially early on, there wasn't really a great understanding of how to do custom components or like custom hitboxes even, and because of that, you would just be outright griefing yourself if you flew a Titan with components on it versus like a Raven's Talon that had no components. So yeah, I can understand why they did it, but yeah,
That is
it's a little bit
interesting
sad.
because when you said that, yeah, coming to think about it, I don't think I remember the last time my wing or a tail blew off on my ship. But yeah, okay, so that's interesting because the component is counted towards the hull. So then, if multiple components gets hit, then it would count towards the hull. I never realized that. Oh,
Yeah,
but okay.
some of the ships also had like funny situations with the components as well, and the most notorious one of those was the dragon, the Kusari fighter, and this continued to be like probably the first major house war that I played was the one between Britonia and Kusari, like the Tau War, and like there's an entire generation of incredibly traumatized BAF players who just have memories of Kusari dragons with their tail fin shot off because there was no
Jesus.
equipment mounted on them. So you were literally just fighting a cockpit that was covered in guns.
Oh my God.
Absolutely disgusting.
We need to
Jammy's
try
like
this.
a living legend. He remembers some of the shit that I learned about, early lore of Discovery that I was like trying to get a good grasp on, where everybody's come from, and that's really cool.
We go to Jamie. Tell us about the lore, and he says,
Yeah.
"I am the lore."
Actually, my source for lore for a long time was Atreides from Crater. In fact, we gave him the nickname as Atreides the Loremaster. And so, like, anytime I wanted to learn some old bit of Disco lore or where Crater was standing in that time or whatever, I'd go to Atreides. So that's kind of
Hmm.
cool. That
Yeah, that actually touches on something that I have been working on and off for a while, and it's something that I actually implemented in practice with the Rhineland rewrite, which was one of the first major projects that I took on when I became story lead. And one of the problems that I've always had with the way that information is presented in Discovery is it's very very difficult for a new player to come in and actually understand the history of what's happened before
yes,
because you know your info cards tend to focus on the most recent events,
and
and the
it's
further back you
always
go,
like kind of
yeah.
scattered, like if you're in
Mm.
space and you're trying to learn this stuff, it's like picking up little morsels of pieces of the puzzle from all over the place.
Now, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because that can actually lead to a real sense of immersion through exploration because you're being rewarded for
Oh no, I agree,
exploring an
but
area to like be able to piece together that patchwork. But the
if you're
bigger
trying to get
problem,
like a generalist perspective of say your
oh
faction,
sure, sure,
or
yeah,
you just want to like know like how this all came together, especially with somebody like me, I'm like obsessed with history. So I always like wanted to know what happened and when and chronologically what order did these things happen, whatever. But
hmm,
yeah, unless you have like somebody that was there that kind of remembers a lot of it, it's kind of difficult to get the big picture.
that is exactly the problem. Yeah. So one of the issues that we have with trying to build a kind of like a cohesive discovery chronology as well is the fact that as time has gone on and you've had so many successive dev teams with like a constant churn of staff as well, um, like the map has grown, the map has shrunk. Elements of previous story have been retconned so that those elements don't actually make sense in like in a whole anymore. And like a very good example of that is the Liberty Rhineland War. Uh,
Mhm.
the entire pretext for that conflict is based on systems that don't exist anymore and were entirely retconned so they never existed.
Hmm.
And because of that, you have these big holes in the chronology where it's not as simple as just going back and documenting things. In some cases, you actually also have to almost like recontextualize the event so that those holes are closed and it all kind of makes a cohesive sense. But the kind of personal bugbear of mine is so much of this stuff isn't recorded anywhere in the game at all. And it used to be that the only place that you could actually find reference to some of these events was either on the forum or on the wiki, and that there was no in-game source. And my personal view is that it should be possible for a player to come into the community and find all of the information that they need just by exploring the game.
Mhm.
And I tried to put that into practice with Rhineland as kind of like a test case, and that involved reviewing every info card in the region, which meant hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of info cards.
That
And then
sounds
also,
very painful.
it took just shy of 6 months to actually complete the entire project. But the biggest part of the project, was a step beyond that, which was reconstruct a single cohesive timeline to kind of like cut away all of the retcon material and stitch together what was left. So all of the events that happened still happened, but there is now a solid basis that explains and builds up to them, and then kind of like paid them off and that kind of thing. And make sure that all of those events on this timeline that I've constructed are explained somewhere in either an info card or a news article. And because of that, there were several hundred news articles that were written that started in 800 AS, covered the gap between the campaign and discovery starting in, I want to say 810 AS was when the first mod release was set, and then documenting all of the events in that region up to the present. So there are still some gaps where I didn't want to do certain events as a part of that project because they overlapped with other regions that would still need to be worked on as well. So like there's missing material from the Rhineland Kusari War because I wanted to tackle that as a single block when I was doing Kusari stuff as well.
Mm.
But now you can go and have a look around Rhineland, and there will be unique news articles on every station near enough, and you will be able to trace back the history of your faction all the way back to the campaign, and in some cases just before. So I think that is kind of the level of quality that I'd want to see across the entire game environment. It's just a huge amount of work, and it's the
Yeah.
issue of balancing that kind of backdating lore and constructing timelines versus actually continuing to push the mod story forward, because that's the
That's
material that players
that's
actually engage
incredible
with.
though.
Yeah, I was about to say, because if you make a big story change like that about content that doesn't even exist anymore, then that one station that served as a defense outpost, that covers that module or covers that entity that no longer exists. Well, then you have to change that or take that out. So, man, I
And
can imagine that's painstaking.
alternatively, also, if like a system gets removed or bases got removed or moved to other places, so it kind of takes that story out of context too.
Mm.
Yeah, that's incredibly difficult to keep up with that kind of stuff. I mean, you would literally need like a team of 10 people or something like that to constantly monitor that stuff, it seems like.
So,
Well,
so the
what we're hoping is that we won't have this kind of issue going forward, where like in an ideal world, and I'm sure I'm being very very optimistic when I say this, we won't have a situation where we're needing to do like large scale retcons with like systems being evaporated and stuff like that in the future. Like
Mega
5.0,
11.
yeah, well, like 5.0 cut a bunch of systems, and some of them were retcons because there just wasn't a way to reconcile the system with like wider lore issues. But in other cases, they weren't retcons; they were story progression. Like Munich was abandoned because the dark matter storm that had been enveloping it for over 10 years in real time finally finished the job. For example,
yeah,
like Pool in Britonia was abandoned because Britonia is broke and can't afford to maintain the infrastructure anymore. Omicron Row was abandoned because the jump connections got cut because a fragment of the Munich dark matter cloud was like circumnavigating between Sigma 15 and Row. Uh, like there are ways of cutting connections and like adding or removing systems that don't involve breaking the entire continuity that lead up to that point.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a big nightmare trying to make sense of Discovery's history, especially if you weren't actually there at the time as well.
Yeah,
And-
that's
well, it's funny.
that's
We were just talking about IMG, and because it seems like Liberty and a few other factions have them FR5s because of events that happened in the past, and I don't even fully understand it. At one point, I was I was in a Universal shipping faction, and Universal hated IMG, and I still don't quite understand exactly what happened. And I
I
imagine
can
it's
tell you what happened if you want the story, but
I got the
okay.
full
But before
scoop.
you do, please do. But before you do, which side were you on?
I wasn't actually directly involved. So that like this was a period where I'd taken a brief break and came back and found just everything on fire. Uh,
Yes.
This would have been the time of the Alond crisis, right?
that was what it was.
So I
Yeah.
say I know
Yeah.
it's about
Master
Alon,
L
but
told me the IMG perspective, but it was definitely laced with some angsty Tau minor, bitterness. But yeah, I don't know if you want to go into that or not. What do you think?
Yeah. The Aylan crisis is controversial even today, and
Oh, it is very
yeah.
much.
oh
Yeah,
boy,
so for anyone who isn't aware of what this is, it is the giant heap of wreckage that is in Omega 3 on one of the trade lane junctions, and it used to be a fairly large IMG shipyard. And basically, the big picture at the time was that Gallia was in the process of invading New London. This was like the Blitz of New London. They'd just come pouring in through the Leeds jump hole. They had destroyed Southampton shipyard. Britannia was kind of on its knees and like months from folding, effectively.
Hmm.
So they had Scarborough Shipyard in Newcastle, which was a civilian shipyard, so it wasn't really designed for military production or maintenance and stuff like that, but it was really just like jury-rigged patch repairs to Britannian capital ships. So Britannia is desperately looking around, thinking we need more facilities to keep us in the war,
Right.
or this is it, is curtains.
To implement
Um,
field repairs on their caps.
yeah, yeah. So like Liberty is in the process of building the Supergate as well, which was there's a Supergate in Alaska now, so I'm sure you know what it is. But at the time, that was connecting Poole in Britannia to Alberta in Liberty. And the idea was that if Britannia could just survive long enough for this connection to open, then the might of Liberty's military and logistics and all the rest of it would come flooding into Britannia. They would like ride to the rescue, and Britannia would be saved. So they just needed this stopgap solution to keep them in the fight in the meantime. And the Bretonian crown turned its covetous eyes on Aylan Shipyard. And the reason this is so controversial is because this wasn't actually a developer driven story development. This was the Bretonian player government and the BAF players of the time sent an ultimatum to the IMG player faction and said, we are going to nationalize your shipyard for the duration of the war, and we will use it to repair our ships. And after the war is over, we'll give it back to you.
Wait, before you go on though, wasn't there some kind of cheeky solution that they try to come to with like Crater as an interim trade partner? It's like because IMG was friendly to Gallia at the time, and and IMG didn't want to. They obviously didn't want to give away assets, and they also didn't want to be seen as friendly to Bretonia when they were already friendly with Gallia. And wasn't there some
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like we'll trade Singapore for Alon or something like that with Crater as like the middleman?
So Crater was there kind of like negotiating as a mediator to try and keep things from escalating out of control.
Mhm.
And the guild at the time was a neutral party in the war, where like obviously a lot of their assets were located in the Towels, and Gallia had occupied the Towels and was the military power in control of that region.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, yeah.
they very much didn't want to be seen as collaborating with Bretonia because they were
Hmm.
worried that all of their northern assets would be seized by Gallia if they did.
Right.
Now the kind of the big problem with all of this is like again this was player driven stuff, and the devs kind of said, well, that's kind of cool, and like co-opted it afterwards. But up until that happened, the concern was kind of like, well, this is just power gaming because you're
Hmm.
threatening to steal an NPC station if we don't kind of like agree.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like legitimized afterwards, but that in of itself was quite a controversial decision. But I think at the time there was a lot of confusion on the IMG side about like, do we even need to actually humor this? Is this even like allowed? Is this something that they can do? And I guess like the story devs kind of shrugged and went, well, it makes sense, I suppose, which kind of like legitimized the whole thing.
Now, I also
But,
heard that there was a lot of dev support in Britonia at the time too.
well, I think they were looking for a reason to
Save Britonia.
yeah, like my personal preference for how that entire story arc should have ended was Britannia would have collapsed and a collaborator state would have been created, with the BAF becoming a kind of like a rebel insurgency faction fighting
That would
alongside Liberty to kind of like
that would have been
restore the crown.
cool. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, like would have, could have, should have, but it went the way it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting because it's the players kind of, especially with the BAF kind of cornering the IMG, but in the same token, almost cornering the devs as well, because in one light, yeah, it does kind of make sense, but then it also strong arms them to force them to do it.
Well, and the notorious part about it, or rather the rather vicious part about it, is that it was actually player driven. I didn't hear that originally. I had heard that it was something that was kind of being pushed by the dev team. Granted, I wasn't around at the time. I heard this through a variety of different sources who were at the time that were on very different sides of this story. But
Mm.
that's interesting. So tell us more.
Yeah, the universal kind of aspect of this as well is interesting too, because this is also the incident that either directly or indirectly led to the role play consequences rule for non-house space. Because basically what happened is at some point during this whole situation, I'm not sure if it was during the crisis or after the shipyard was seized and BNM was in control. A universal transport was in Omega 3, kind of like supporting Britannia's actions, and the IMG pirated and destroyed it or something. And the Universal player complained to Liberty's government, despite the fact this took place in Omega 3, and the IMG were effectively outlawed in Liberty over a piracy incident that took place in Omega 3, which
Nice.
Wow.
yeah, these days that wouldn't be allowed because houses can't apply roleplay consequences for things that happen outside house space. But
Yeah, so in
back then it was Wild
retaliation,
West.
from what I heard, the IMG faction started putting out bounties on Universal and just killing them on sight everywhere.
So when I was in the Universal faction, that makes sense. And there was so first off, before I get into that, when was all this happening? What year?
That must be, I want to say 2019,
Okay, so this almost
2018.
happened because I started playing back in like 2013, 2014, kind of when the Rhineland War was still going on, but I think winding down at that point. But I just kind of played here and there a little bit, and then took a big break, and then it was right before COVID when I kind of came back, and um, Universal higher ups were always kind of talking smack about the IMG, and I'm thinking, what does the IMG have to do with Universal at all? And their side of the story was kind of convoluted, and of course, I'm sure biased at the time. So, being the good little trooper I am, okay, IMG is terrible. They're the bad guys. And then Alon Shipyard, I think at one point was up for auction. And then the Universal leadership was saying, oh, we need to step in and try to put our name in for the bid. And I'm thinking, well, first off, what does Universal have anything to do with building ships? And then also, what business do we have in the Omegas building ships? It didn't make any sense. But now it makes a little bit of sense. It almost seems like we wanted to get it as a sort of a finger in the face to IMG, which, yeah, I didn't.
Well, another thing as well, which, and I don't know if this was a intentional decision or if it was just a coincidence, is Cordova shipping platform, which obviously is the spot where Freeport 4 used to be, which was a like a quite an important IMG station. that was destroyed during the Gallic War. And again, this was another one where Liberty had commandeered the station, kind of like nationalised it, said, we need this for the defence of Magellan, and we'll give it back to you after the war. Only, of course, when Gallia invaded Magellan, as a Liberty Navy position, it was attacked and destroyed, and there was nothing to give back. So, yeah, like Liberty auctions off the spot, and it's a bidding war between Boex and Universal. Universal gets it and builds a shipping platform there, and the poor IMG don't get a look in.
So basically, the gem to pull away from this all is hashtag justice for Alond, right?
No, I don't think we want that hashtag circulating.
Yeah.
We've had enough drama there already.
We're gonna start a crusade. No, actually, so since then, a little bit of IMG info for those who don't know. In kind of once IMG accepted the fact that they were never going to get it back, they started a huge RP campaign to build another shipyard down in the Omegas. So they built Madeira Base, which has moved around a few times. I think it's still in Omega 48 at this point, but it has shipyard
Mm.
capacity at this point, and they still have retained Singapore shipyard up in the Taos. So although it was a bit of a fucked up situation, they have in some ways recovered.
Ish. I mean, 5.0 kind of threw a spanner in the works for them again with the changes to Dublin.
Yeah, with Hood.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
WTF?
God, the poor IMG. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
actually have a lot of questions on IMG I gotta hit you up with later, but yeah.
sure.
Unless we do another episode and just call it story time with Jammy.
Yeah, I think that could literally be a recurring thing actually, since he is like the living storybook of Discovery. Um,
Absolutely.
so one thing I did wanted to ask you, with your current, so you came back to Discovery right about the time that I was leaving the last time, and you're now part of staff, and you're the story lead, but you're also heavily involved in economy. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I have slightly too many hats where I'm story lead, but I also do a lot of system developing. Econ is kind of a backseat issue at the moment, admittedly, and like story kind of links quite heavily in with events as well.
I didn't know that you were doing some system stuff too. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've done loads of system stuff now. Like basically learned how to do system modding
Hmm.
as an outreach of the story stuff that I was doing because you know we would have a official server event where there would be some kind of outcome,
Yeah,
and I would be going off and bothering the system dev saying, oh, can you move XYZ thing and you know make changes here and there and
yeah.
adjust these NPC patrols and all this kind of stuff. And I figured, well, rather than bothering people, I could just teach myself how to do this, and
Well, that's cool.
then I can help contribute.
Well,
So
e-
yeah,
economy used to be a lot more difficult than what it is now with like the economizer and some other stuff. But whenever I was econ lead, I would just shove all that shit off on Grossier. Be like, all right, Grossier, we're gonna be changing this. Can you update that? He
yeah,
was
I
my buddy in systems.
very like previously in like long ago in other dev teams, I've helped with like infocard story and econ stuff before, and like economy was always the nightmare department
Yeah, the
for the
redheaded
mod because
stepchild.
yeah, and it was just this absolutely horrific enormous database that
Yeah,
Zoria would be maintaining,
disgusting.
which yeah was all kind of like mostly manually calculated, and whenever any kind of travel time calculation was changed because a jump hole had moved or because like a system connection had changed or whatever, this entire like, revolting thing would need to be recalculated.
Yes,
And
yes. When I
oh
was
god, the
introduced
memories.
into economy, I was horrified from what Widow taught me that I would basically have to have like six different windows open in order to do this shit, plus a calculator. And like, uh, I felt like I was like in a dusty closet counting beans.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
never even thought about that because back when I think it was Grocer, he was going around changing the sizes of systems, especially up in the Kusari space, shrinking them down and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I bet that throws all that off, and then
Yep.
and
Yeah,
then
like a little inside secret about the 5.0 development process, and God, it was a traumatic nightmare, and I never want to do anything like it ever again. Is for a long while, economy was the critical kind of issue that was preventing release because there had been so many significant changes to system layout, to systems being removed, all that kind of stuff. That
Yes.
regardless of the division reducing the number of zeros on your credits, that there was simply no way that the economy file could ship because it would be utterly broken because so much had changed. Like the whole thing needed recalculating from the ground up.
Yeah.
And the only reason we were able to ship in the end was because Haste actually designed a tool from scratch, which we called the
Hmm.
Economizer,
Yep.
which is something that can auto-generate prices based on travel time and a config file where we can assign whether a particular base is a producer, a consumer, or a reseller of a particular good. So now an economy dev doesn't need to be someone that's sitting in a dusty cupboard with 7 windows and a calculator.
Mhm.
They could be someone who's managing a config file to decide what the output of a station is, and then the calculator does all the numbers for us.
Yeah.
And having that is an absolute game changer
Yeah, it
because now
is.
we're just tweaking bonuses and values and that kind of stuff rather than actually doing the calculations.
And because of the issues with making sure you had excellent communication between storage systems and econ, it would
Mm,
be really easy before to miss out on some massive change that doesn't seem that massive except from the perspective of economy, and you have like one base that was moved to another system, or one system that was scaled down overall that you didn't know about, and all of a sudden you publish an update and this trade run becomes stupidly overpowered or something, so
mm.
that was a nightmare before.
Yeah. Another funny story from the misty kind of depths of the past of Discovery history. Have you ever heard of the Harris honeypot?
The Harris honeypot? I don't
Hmm.
think so.
Yeah, this was like an old trade exploit, which is the battleship Macduff was stationed outside Planet Harris in Tau 31,
I remember
and
that.
yeah, and like this was I want to say 2008, possibly 0.84. And there was a very minor economy issue, which meant that Planet Harris would produce prisoners, and the battleship Macduff would buy them for
Oh
slightly more
god.
than it should do. And you like 5K transports didn't exist back then. You only had 4.2Ks. Um, but like Harris was just this boiling hive of 4.2K transports, shuttling the 10K back and forth between Harris and the Macduff. And the honeypot was the fact that like terrorist groups would go in and just run riot. Like the SCRA, the coalition, they were still around back. Well, they were around back then, and they would go in with like torpedo bombers and just drop like supernovas to just go through and just completely massacre all these traders that were silently grinding back and forth. For a while, it was called Harris syndrome because of the amount of like out of character um,
Oh
like
Jesus.
messages and like the cursing and like the
Yeah.
rage and all that kind of stuff. It was just Harris syndrome or like Lowell syndrome or that kind of stuff. But yeah, small little econ error led to a really ridiculous situation.
Wow.
Mm. So as far as anything you're cooking up now for economy or story, is there and you don't have to say specifically if you don't want to, but is there any big developments that's going to be going on with story soon? Any wars breaking out or new economy?
Um, yeah, big things are coming. So the next kind of big patch, we have a internal deadline that we've set for when we're going to lock in for final QA and prepare for the actual release to come down. Um, like there's going to be a lot of new exploration content in the next patch, and there is a lot of work that's gone into the omegas as well. Lots of stuff
Nice.
to do and find there and explore. And like several of the major story arcs that have been pending for a while are going to get some movement forward. Like some of those things are going to be waiting on like official server events to like fully kick off. However, all the pieces kind of in place for those things to happen now.
That's awesome. So even like little stories, like the Attica prison station in Colorado, is that going to get any work on
Is
it?
that a sore spot there, Stugar?
A little bit.
I don't know where you are in Liberty lore history and catching up with all that stuff, but it's an ongoing running joke between Stugar and I of the Attica Super Duper Mega Max because it's such a absolutely ridiculous story update in our opinion, and we constantly deride it. But yeah.
So is this the one where the prison was hijacked by rogues that were actually Xenos that were actually lane
This
hackers
is
and
this
then
is
used the thrusters to?
this is the one where a band of brigands tows a Liberty high security prison
They-
through heavily patrolled space of the biggest military in series.
Yeah, they somehow have the logistics and the communication to be able to pull this off, but not enough to actually drive the thing correctly. And
Not only is it
it's still
silly,
smoking.
but it's also the fact that it came out in one single patch without any like, events leading up to it or like story beats or anything that would suggest that this was like a process.
Mm, yeah, I can see why people might not be happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that does touch on an issue that I definitely am very mindful of, which is uh, stories should be interactive and tactile in the sense that players can actually engage with it.
Oh
And
my god. We're in love with
like,
you.
Yeah, man, this is you talk about honeypot. This is honey in the ear right now. Keep talking to me.
like, I suppose a good way of kind of exploring that issue is looking at a case where that went really wrong. And
Okay.
um,
You mean
what I'm going to
besides
talk
what we
about
just
is,
mentioned?
I mean, that's small fries in comparison, but
Yeah, I was about to say
uh,
there's bigger things probably house-wide that can be addressed as well.
yeah, so I'm going to go back to 5.0's release, and like
Mhm.
5.0's release was just very difficult because of how big the project was, how many moving parts there were, and how long it had been in production for. So like even across 5.0's development cycle, which I think was like a year and a half, like there have been entire team changeovers, and like knowing what had been changed and how and when and all that kind of stuff was challenging. But the bit that I want to focus on is the time skip and the Outcast Slave Revolt. And I think that the Outcast Slave Revolt had the potential to be one of the more interesting things that happened in the Omicrons for uh, many years. But the problem that we have here is that 5.0 shipped with a time skip of several years, and the slave revolt was set up, played out, and then paid off inside the time skip. So players never actually got to interact with any of it. They just logged in one day, and the aftermath of this giant momentous event that could have been quite fun to play out had already happened. Um, like I think the material is well written. I think the actual arc itself makes a load of sense.
Mhm.
I think it lays the foundations for more interesting things in the future. I do think having the entire thing happen off screen was a big waste of the potential that it clearly had. And like for obvious reasons, a lot of the Outcast players don't like it because they just feel this thing was sprung on them. That's all downsides, no upsides. They didn't get to have any fun with it, and
I
I
I
find
mean
find
even
it hard
other
to blame them.
factions, I think other factions also feel pretty disappointed with it too.
Hmm. And it is understandable. I mean, like again, would have, could have, should have. Like we're not going to do any more time skips going forward. But it's just a really good example of how kind of like not being able to actually interact with a development, just having it be a fait accompli off screen is going to rub people up the wrong way.
That's actually been a massive contentious issue for many, many years on Discovery, is this idea that story is um, something that happens without any player impetus sometimes. And a lot of people get really, really upset. And it has been presented many times in my history, my short history with Discovery, that it's just like, well, you just accept it. This is what's happening. We, and the perspective from various factions, to be completely honest, is like, well, we don't really care with what you're working on or with the things that have been going on in your faction's history. We're just going to like, shoehorn this thing in and ship it, and you can just deal with it from there. So that's very relieving to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
and
like just to put some slight caveats on that though, when I say tactile and interactive, I mean that players should be able to actually
Experience it.
experience it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's fine for player actions to kind of like steer the flavor or like the fluff associated with the story as well. But I think story developers also have to be there as almost like a moderator to
Yeah, absolutely. They
like
have
control
to
the flow.
consider a bit of the bigger picture. And so some of the
Mm,
things that you're cooking up in your faction aren't going to jive with either what's happened or with what's going on in other parts of the big picture. But at the same time, being able to be there, see those things play out either through events or, some kind of like content that's currently in existence
mm,
is well appreciated. So that's, I do understand that there are decisions that have to be made as story that are just, they can't be a public forum, they can't be like getting everybody's vote on, and that's just how these kinds of things are. But being able to see those things unfold rather than just like having an update and just this is it, is kind of definitely the
yeah,
preferred
and
way to go.
I think that's one of the real kind of like strengths behind smaller incremental content patches rather than giant sweeping updates.
Right.
Like I think people do like giant sweeping updates because there's suddenly loads of content to engage with. They maybe don't quite so much like the gaps between those giant sweeping updates.
Yeah.
Um,
i,
but
I mean, we
yeah,
had full elements of the staff team that came and went during that development cycle. I left and came back and left again during the 5.0 patch cycle, actually. Um, so I think the 5.0 was really, really excellent because it brought so much, not necessarily story content, but like mechanics updates and system changes, and it kind of changed the whole feel of Discovery in a lot of ways.
mm,
And since then we've experienced constant increased populations, which is great. And I think it's given a lot more things for different factions and players to do. And of course, that's a constantly progressing process. But yeah, story is unfortunately a very finicky thing, and having massive changes in story without any kind of player interaction is
mm,
not the best.
well, and
yeah,
and to your point, Zentor, because I've when you said about a lot of players are returning, is I feel like they're returning for the same reasons as even you yourself, or even I kind of left for a year there, and kind of for the same things. We just don't we feel disconnected from the world that we're trying to live in. The immersion's broken. We're just kind of lost in space, no pun intended. And
mhm,
a lot of changes were made. So when you first launch out of Manhattan, as far as looking around, not a lot has changed. Newark is still there, Trenton's is still there. So in that regard, not a ton has changed, but there's a lot more to do. You know, relating back to the Kusari episode again, he's talking about collecting cards. It's like, wait, what?
I didn't
This is
even
a
know that was there. Yeah.
right. And so, as I'm flying around, maybe I'm flying through the Omegas or through the Omicrons. haven't really been flying straight to my jump hole anymore. I'm gonna check out this cloud over here, or I'm gonna check, maybe take some detours, and maybe if I could see a little nugget. And I'm convinced that, and Jamie, please don't say if this is the case or not, but I'm really curious if there's things hidden throughout that's not in the patch notes for a reason, and I'm curious
yeah.
to see any of that unraveling.
Sometimes,
But again, like especially the POB stuff too. Going back to more things to do, Zentor and I are POB buffs, and with all the changes that were made, we were kind of reduced back down to zero. Kind of have to relearn what is everything happening, and then through learning and through listening to other people and their projects and what they're doing, it's like, wow, this is actually really cool. So now we're
When
getting back into it.
you have
I mean, on
entire
the point
sides.
of like things to do as well, that you're talking about. I think there is definitely more work to do there. There's a lot more work to do there, and I think something that we really do need to prioritize, and something that like certainly Antonio is focusing on, something that I've been doing on and off as well, is finding ways to restore like single player activities like the PvE. And when I'm talking about PvE, I don't mean battle zones or like Titans encounters or anything like that. I mean the actual standard PvE experience that was a part of the vanilla game that over the years Discovery actually intentionally stripped away in the interest of not disrupting player interactions. So like for example, you'll notice that NPCs are entirely toothless. They won't target players. And that was done on purpose to avoid disrupting player interactions. However, it also means that the game environment, like the fidelity of the game, feels incredibly sterile and empty and like soulless. And that's something that new players like continually feed back to us, is that the game doesn't feel as alive as it does during the campaign, and it's a lot of it is down to the way that NPCs are designed. So we're already doing a lot of work to actually find more engaging ways to interact with NPCs, whether that's through overhauling their loadouts, overhauling their AI behavior so that they will actually start targeting players again. We're going to be restoring cargo to NPCs as well. So there's going to be like junk cargo that they're carrying that you'll be able to loot and stuff. Like police NPCs will start scanning people for contraband again. Pirates will start trying to steal your cargo. Like really just all about making that game environment feel more vibrant. And when you're talking about hidden things as well, like things that you can find in the vanilla game, one of the ways that they used to hide things was by using patrol paths as hints. So you could find a pirate patrol path and follow the path around, and there would probably be like a wreck, like a dead ship nearby, which was like loot that they had dumped. And Discovery has always been really, really bad at implementing patrol paths, and that's something that we've been significantly changing over the last year or so. And like Antonio in particular has gone through and restored all of the vanilla patrol paths that over the years Discovery has deleted. So
Wow.
Awesome.
now you can actually go through and look at the patrol path tab on your nav map and use it as a way of actually discovering jump holes in remote systems, because that's where all the patrols converge. Or you can follow remote patrol paths around the outskirts of a system and organically stumble across a wreck, because that's where they hid their loot. Like you don't need to look things up on an online nav map. You can actually like diegetically discover things in the game, and it doesn't feel like bullshit where things are hidden 80k off the plane. Like all of these little things, they really help to make the game feel more immersive and engaging. And I think it's that kind of polish that we've really lacked for a very long time.
Hmm.
Wow, this is. I mean, that I feel like this is everything that we've been kind of asking for, and um, I said recently that going through every once in a while, I like to go through and watch the single player campaign again, just to pick up little things or just kind of relearn lore of some factions or some areas that I've gotten unfamiliar with. And I remember that you're watching a ship go through a jump gate, and before the animation's even done, you're hearing a radio transmission from a police scanning cargo for contraband.
Mm.
And I do know that's definitely one thing. I smuggle quite a bit, as even if I'm hanging out inside of a lawful system, I don't really have a fear. If there's nobody on the player base, then I have no fear whatsoever. I feel immune and just kind of fly straight. So this is, because I want that. I want to, as I'm approaching my destination, I want to be on the edge of my seat all the way through until, once I hit F3 and the docking sequence starts, that's when I could breathe that breath of fresh air. But until then, man, I'm coming in hot with illegal guns. Hope I don't get caught, by somebody. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and like restoring those mechanics as well, that opens up other kind of options as well, because like at the moment you've got concealed contraband commodities, and they're a bit of a gimmick. They sell for slightly more, but not really an appreciable amount. And most of the profit that you get from manufacturing them on a POB comes from the fact that if you have a production bonus, you end up exporting slightly more goods than you actually put in. So whether that's like sneaky junkers cutting the cardamom with like padding or something, I don't know however you want to rationalize that. But the goods themselves, they're not that popular, so people don't really bother doing it. But if you have the contraband scanning turned on for lawful NPCs, there's good odds that they're going to intercept you outside Manhattan, and the mooring fixture is going to turn hostile, and you won't be able to dock anymore.
Exactly.
However, if you're carrying concealed goods, they don't recognize those as contraband. So you turn up, they scan you, they go, "Oh, cargo shipment full of consumer goods, looks good, carry on." So that's not a mechanical thing that appears on Darkstat when you're looking up the profit margins, but it's a soft factor that makes those commodities more viable.
Interesting.
Absolutely. And same thing goes for the actual player interaction too, because if I'm smuggling in something, it's, but it's stashed in with consumer goods or something like that. They won't be able to see that, and I could just keep going along my way. But if I'm, flying through I try not to take actual trade lanes when I'm smuggling to keep it real. But like if I'm crossing the path of a trade lane, and there's a 46 flies by and they dump out, if I'm hauling straight up cardamine or black market light arms or something, yeah, it's I'm screwed. There's nothing I could do, but it's
Well,
really cool to have that option.
that neatly touches on something else, because like people a lot of the time forget that police factions have access to Lagsnet, the trade lane scanner, and that gives them a little text message whenever someone uses like a trade lane or a jump gate or whatever, and gives them a list of all of your equipment and the cargo that you're carrying. Um, However, to notice that the concealed cargo is actually contraband, you need to be within physical scanning range and read the info card. And
Oh.
Telaxnet doesn't show it up as actual contraband. It just gives the name of the commodity, which looks like consumer goods. But yeah, if I'm running my police ship through Bretonia, my like CDI ship, I will always have that lane scanner on, and there is a crazy number of people that would just happily go traveling along like a trade lane while carrying contraband gold, like wildcat gold.
Mm.
Like, well, thanks for making my job easy for me. I'm just going to intercept you now.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Was that something that was changed recently? Because I was in LPI about 2, 3 years ago, and I was using the scanner, and it showed the locations of where they were flying. Did it always show the commodity as well?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
I actually didn't know that either. I did know that Tlaxnet existed, but I didn't know that it showed the actual commodity.
Yeah, it's so incredibly powerful as a tool. Like, I love flying police ships. Like the thing that I enjoy the most about it is I don't particularly like using the player list to chase people down. Even though at like a lower server pop, it's really the only way that you're going to get interactions.
Right.
But if you are on a police ship and you have Telaxnet turned on, you don't need to use the playlist. You can use the actual tools that you have access to in character
Yeah.
to monitor the entire lane traffic across your entire house, and then you can use that to actually create encounters. So that is something that I really appreciate is like having access to these tools means
Hmm.
you completely circumvent the kind of like the metagaming issue of the player list
Yeah.
because you have a better alternative.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
are you involved in any other factions or like aspects of the game then?
So well, I mean, like most of my time is dev work
Mhm.
at the moment. I'm the faction leader for the Civil Defense Initiative, and we are actually applying for official faction status at the moment. So
Mhm.
we will hit our 3 months on the 12th of February, I think. So that's coming up fairly
Oh,
soon.
cool.
And then I guess we'll find out how that goes.
Nice. So is any part of the requirement that you're worried about? Activity time, player numbers, amount of role play?
No, nothing like that. I mean, the feedback that we've had from the community has been like overwhelmingly positive. It's actually been really touching to see some of the feedback that we've been getting.
Cool.
Awesome.
Really, I have just been like supremely lucky with the people that applied that kind of felt something in the group speak to them. So like just to shout out kind of like the core 3 members that have helped make the thing a success. I mean, we've got Mad Rat, Mad Villain, and McConaughey. And between the three of them, they have created this set of just really compelling, hilarious characters that are just fun to be around.
Hmm.
And when people see their characters logging in and see the TDI tag logging in, um, like they'll come and find us because they think it's funny. And that's really what we were hoping to achieve. Like when I wrote up the faction status page, one of the things that I did do is include a kind of like a charter or an ethos of the things that we want to achieve. And the first and most important one is create fun. Like first and foremost, the most important thing about the group is to create a fun environment for our members, for the people that want to interact with us, for our opponents. It doesn't matter. Like Discovery has in recent years kind of like fallen into like the raid logging culture where like an emergency chat is pinged, everyone
Yeah.
piles in, they have their big fight, they log off again, and it goes back
Counter
to being
logging.
quiet.
Yep.
Counter logging, yeah. So instead, what we're trying to do is be the person that logs in first, and
Hmm.
people see that and come to find us. So
Yeah.
being that like seed of activity where people can come and find really enjoyable role play, and then it kind of goes from there.
I,
And
I was about
I
to
think,
go
yeah,
ahead.
no, you please go ahead.
So I was about to say because I feel like your faction maybe doesn't always have to PvP all the time. So maybe
Mm,
you get that response and they come in, and it's really because I'm a trader. I mostly trade and smuggle and stuff, and I have a list of players that I both stay away from and players that I'll sometimes even go out of my way as a trader
mm,
if I've had a good encounter with a pirate or any, if I'm smuggling with a good police officer or somebody, I'll go out of my way to get interdicted or have an experience with them, and that's really what it is it's an experience. And to your point, I feel like oftentimes too many players are in to catch a win rather than have an experience or have
yeah,
an
exactly. Yeah.
interaction similar to like I like to imagine it like WWE wrestling. You have two wrestlers in there, you have the opposing side, but
Yeah,
it's a
one of
story.
you is the hill. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they're telling a story, and off camera they're friends. So, maybe at
Mm,
some point, Zentor and I were on opposite sides and we create this awesome experience, and then afterwards, we're laughing and having a beer together, and oh, that was awesome when you did this, or something like
mm.
that. I feel like that's missing a lot, and a lot of players don't don't have that impetus. So, maybe when you get that response from, say, Molly's want to roll in and interact with CDI. It doesn't always have to even be a fight too. Maybe the Mollies roll in, talk shit to you for 10 minutes and then turn around and
Mm.
scram, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's refreshing that there's several groups I feel like are starting to spring up recently that are bringing that, role play aspect back to Discovery.
Well, you
Yeah,
had
and
me at
like we're trying to bring back some like quite old school vibes as well. Like something that we do that's a bit unusual in the current day and age is by default all in-game cons are in character, including group chat. And the reason that's quite important is because when you're like on your own with other faction members and like you're not interacting with other players, like, to be honest, that's probably going to be the majority of the time. And if group chat defaults to out of character, then you're not actually going to get a great roleplay experience from being in that faction, because the vast majority of it is just going to be hanging out as players rather than characters. And like there are some factions that are like quite well known for having like very well developed internal role play, to the point that maybe they become quite insular. So like I guess Technocracy is maybe an example of that, where they do really like fleshed out, comprehensive, great internal role play, to the point that maybe people think they're a little bit unapproachable at times. But I actually think that's a really good model to start from. Is you have faction characters that are actually really well defined individuals with all of their own kind of like personalities and funny little quirks and stuff like that. And a part of the fun of actually playing in that faction is developing the relationship with other characters in that faction as well. And like that was one of my favorite things about like old school Boax back in the day, in like I don't know, like 2012 to 2015 Boax, it was a heavily character driven trade group. Like obviously there aren't as many Boax players these days, so you can't quite pull off the same thing. But yeah, like just having internal networks of relationships and role play and that kind of stuff really keeps it like entertaining and engaging, even when there aren't other people around.
Well, you mentioned Technocracy, and so I will have to plug real quick. Nix, I know you're hearing this episode. I know you're probably our number one listener.
I know
Darling,
where you're going with
we've
this.
been asking you for a bit now. Come on the podcast. Come on.
Oh my gosh, we had oh, who was it?
I mean,
Leo.
she might do it if you offered to like promote some of the Nomad drawing she's doing as like a sponsor.
Yeah.
Although I don't know what the age rating on that would be. So
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. We told her we would plug everything that she wants, but she doesn't. But no, one episode it was Leo. Apparently, he's been back at this time. This was like a year or so ago. He was
more than
having an
that.
issue where every time he'd log in with his tag ship, Oxo would come after him and all that. So I think that episode the sponsor was LPI, because they're currently protecting the facility because Oxo's trying to break in. So
I forgot about that. No, I think we like drunkenly raided the OXO Discord one time. Was it? I think that was you and me.
oh
And
yeah, we were
we were
tagging
like,
him.
we were plying Nyx, trying to get her to get on the podcast with us sometime. So
She told me something one day, and to your point, Jamie, I thought it was very, very interesting and very creative. Is her, and I don't know all the specifics, but her character is of course like half robot, got the the data with the brain going on. And if her character dies server side, then she does a dice roll to determine how much her cognitive processing declines.
that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like
Because
that.
really,
it
I
does
didn't
like
know
an
that.
upload. So similar to like, when you have a picture and whether it's you send it through text or Facebook, wherever you do it, it degrades slightly. And so
Mm.
it's that same concept where it just degrades over time. So as you continue to, because I guess it uploads, I don't remember the whole story, but her similar to Eve, her consciousness uploads to a new mainframe. And so therefore there's a decline. And
See,
yeah, I
that's
thought that
kind of
was
the
really
stuff that we
interesting.
got to ask her more about. So, get on the
Right.
podcast.
Yeah.
No, like people like voluntarily incorporating RPG mechanics into their own characters is really cool.
Yeah.
And I would actually love to do something similar with CDI, and something that I've been kind of like slowly scoping out and building a rule set for is a Discovery TTRPG based on the Tech Noir rule set. And the idea that I have in mind for CDI is you would basically have like a series of games using the characters uh, from the server, so like the characters they joined the faction with, and it would be like little procedural police stories based on Planet Sprague and like the absolute nightmare that that place is. Um, so like a one shot where you're solving a crime, or like you're busting up a smuggling ring, or something like that. So just little stories actually set on the terrestrial planet side of things that you don't actually get to see in the game. And I think that's a fun way of exploring more of the setting with the characters, and uh, I guess just like something that's a bit novel and different as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really interesting because because again, anymore I feel like players are in to get the win. Or I've always in the past when I was a saltier, slightly younger but still kind of older man, I'd always say hardcore PvPers they're just angry because they couldn't hack it in Call of Duty. So but it's really fun and interesting, and hearing more because I feel like it's a trend. It's really trending, and it's becoming more popular. Players actually limiting themselves because it makes more role play sense. Whether it's
Yeah, look at
Kusari with
Jeff.
Starfires or Jeff, exactly. um yeah, and I've even it's brought me to really start looking into SRPing for a couple other different projects we got going on, secret, a little hush hush,
Secret.
um, but yeah, like creating a limited, if I want to be a sole proprietorship, as far as like a transport company or like a smaller scale, start small with a custom ID. I get to do my own thing, but I can only fly like freighter classes. And then as I develop the role play and the story, which shows the company growing, that can almost be my progression, is upgrading the ID slowly over time,
Mm.
and even possibly limiting commodities. So maybe I can only carry solid commodities, to kind of mimic the real world. Here in America, we have not only do you get the license for driving truck, but you also get specialty licenses, whether it's to drive flatbeds or hazmat, explosives, whatever it is, you get specialty licenses. So kind of building my credentialing over time. I thought that'd be
Mm.
really interesting, but it'd be a grind, but I think that'd be fun. So, but
Definitely. I think that this has been a really, I mean, first of all, eye-opening experience having Jamie on and hearing a lot of this like deep history, and then also getting a lot of what I feel like is a new approach, or rather a refreshing approach on the dev leadership, which is actually one of the inspiring reasons why I came back and wanted to actually pursue staff again. So I felt like around 5.0, we did get a lot of quality folks back that were returning right before or right at 5.0, and that's really cool to get some of these people.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's yeah, I know my friends are familiar with it, but of course I'm applying to be a moderator, and it's the same thing. Because when we got this recent influx of staff coming in, and I look at the names and I'm thinking, oh, well, let's see how it's going to go now, and I start to look at the content, and I start to look at some of the plans, or the way, even something as simple as just the way that staff members are talking to players. I reached out to C Panda when he got his upgrade to admin, and just wanted to say to him, I appreciate your moderation work, and the way, even with sanctions and rules, just how you talk to players is, you don't have to be condescending, and you don't have to be rude, and you could talk to them like people, try to figure things out with them. And I'm seeing this as again, we're talking about trends, seeing this as a trend. So it's really made me lean back into discovery and want to put my hand in the pile. And I see Zentor, you doing it, and I'm seeing the return of other good players too. Players that left, they were have animosity, or they're upset, and trying to even reach out to other players that have left and say, hey, come back. It's worth
Yeah,
it
give it
now.
another
It's
go. I mean,
exactly. So
I got a reach out the other day from Antonio yesterday actually, and I just got back into staff like this past week or whatever, and he reached out and was like, "Hey, I know you've been in there before, but if there's anything you need help with, like understanding what systems,
Yeah,
things with systems, or trying to get back up to date on Git and all that stuff, just let me know. And I felt that was super awesome. And then, of course, Jamie and I have had conversations already in voice chat about some of the upcoming plans and ideas, and very exciting. I feel like the attitude for staff is very different now, and I really appreciate that.
yep, absolutely. So,
Well, I don't have anything else for Jamie. What about you, Stugar?
I got nothing unless Jamie, if you have anything else that you want to plug or talk about or go over during the episode.
I mean, I feel like I've probably rambled long enough, and I'm sure people are probably sick of it by now. So,
I
I
do, and maybe we could talk a little bit more off, when we cut the recording. But I kind of do like the idea of having like Jamie come on when he can,
Story time with Jamie.
here and there, and he has kind of a plug in an old story, something that
Uh,
happened in the
I
past.
don't know. Maybe put it up with a poll for the audience or something.
Yeah,
yeah, we've got a polls and questionnaires channel, so we'll definitely put that up once this one goes up, which will probably be tomorrow. Um, so that's yeah, I think we could definitely do something like that. Everybody get your s'mores ready, and we'll sit around the campfire and listen to old Jamie tell us something.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I suppose for me then, just to close out, just want to again pass along all the thanks to the people that have been playing or interacting with CDI as well. It's been a really kind of heartwarming experience, seeing how people have received us over like recent time, and also thanks to all of the work that's going on in staff as well, because yeah, it's been really heartening seeing how things have been moving along and the work that's been done, and just the passion and the quality that goes into it all as well. So.
Yeah, so actually, our very next episode, which we're recording later today, is going to be another member of staff, which is going to be Kai. So maybe we can keep up the trend and we get haste. Hey, buddy, haste, haste. Come on. We're
Get
getting him.
all of staff. We should just have a staff episode, a
We could
staff
totally
meeting
do that. Have
episode.
a staff.
Well, I mean, a while back we did a staff roundtable where we just rambled for a bit on the stage in the main Discord, and people could ask us questions and stuff. So like
Really?
maybe it's
When
time
was that?
to. Oh, that was a little while ago.
I proposed that to Reeves like 2 years ago, and he was like, "How would you even make that work?" And it just kind of killed it. But I was like, "I would love to do this."
How
No, I
does
mean
this
we
sound,
like
Zeno?
there was good feedback, and people seemed interested in another one. And like at first it was a little bit awkward. We weren't sure what we were going to talk about, and then just kind of got into the flow of it. People had loads of questions. There was a good turnout.
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
So
people really desire that transparency and being able to have the accessibility to reach out and just like ask whatever they feel. So that's cool.
We
And
could
we should plan on doing another one of those and maybe host it on the podcast.
we could definitely do that here, and then if we have maybe set up a channel where players can start posting questions, and of course during the flow of the episode we can, I'm sure there's going to be those ones that hey, can we change this because this is dumb,
Yeah,
like, and
yeah.
nothing of substance. We can cancel
Just
those
skip
out,
those. Well, we can
but
like
yeah,
have a lead up, just have a week of just taking in questions for staff, and we can start out with things that we've come up with as well. And then during it, we can have a live in feed of questions if we need to. That would be really cool. Actually, maybe we should really consider that.
yeah,
yeah,
or
I mean there is the live stage feature that can be used. Like we set one of those up on the main community Discord, and you can also invite people up as speakers or moderators and stuff onto the
Oh,
stage.
okay.
So
I have to look into
um,
that.
yeah, and the advantage of doing it that way as well is it sends out a ping to all the people that are in the server to say event is starting on the stage. You're like welcome to come in to listen. And I think there was like 40, 50 odd people kind of sitting through to listen to most of it last time. So the ping seems to work.
Cool. Yeah, I think that if we could combine that with the ability to record it for people to hear it in post would be spectacular.
absolutely.
Have we opened a can of worms?
Yeah,
All right.
I'm already writing stuff down.
All right. Well, this has been an awesome episode of the podcast. I very much thank you, Jamie, for coming on. We'll have you on
Yes,
again. If there's anything
absolutely.
else that you want to add to that, Racer, otherwise we'll probably close it out.
The only last little thing I have to say, and of course, Zentor, we've already kind of started a little bit here and there, but this goes to Jamie and any other staff, especially when it comes to mundane tasks, whether it's just rooting through info cards or just something, something that anybody can do. My services are available. So if you have an ask, hey, can you look through this system's info cards for any mention of this or anything like that, crunching numbers, whatever. My services are available, so just DM me, and I'm available to help out in any capacity I can. And other than that, yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Jamie. I think this is the first time we've had a guest on that Zentor and I aren't too familiar with, so it was really fun learning more about you and learning about some of the projects, things going on, and some of the past about Discovery. So, as much as you're appreciative of the feedback and the response you've gotten for your factions, really thank you, and thank you to some of the other staff that have stepped in recently and kind of made Discovery back alive and a friendly place to play.
Yeah, it's been great to be here as well.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast, and we will see you in space.
See ya. Holla.